representative of our agency. So thank you much.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing us good cases.
Well, thank you. So right now, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the arena of law, what makes you tick, and where we're going?
Sure. I'm the Deputy State's Attorney for Harford County. I have been a prosecutor in this county for about 11 years. I had a year on before that in Virginia, so I have about 12 years as a prosecutor. As deputy right now, I have a certain different responsibility than most assistant state's attorneys. Now I have to supervise and manage an office that has 30 lawyers and about 70 total staff in our office, about 70 total employees, from secretaries and paralegals to investigators to other attorneys in our office. So right now I operate and manage and supervise a trial team in our circuit court division, directly control and help with the investigation and prosecution of a number of cases within my trial team. I personally handle typically violent street crimes, a lot of the high-profile cases that occur in the county, things of significance. Basically, I came up through the system as an assistant about 11 years ago. Mr. Castley hired me in 2007, and I've kind of worked my way up from being an assistant state's attorney in the district court division up through our circuit court division, which is our felony trial division, ultimately to a senior assistant state's attorney, and then last month I was promoted to deputy state's attorney. So now I'm part of Mr. Castley's administration and running the office.
Well, let me ask you, let's go back a little deeper. Young David Ryden, what was your, right to the chase, what made you that passion to want to go into an office where, hey, I think everybody out there knows it's not cheap to go to law school. So you're really becoming a servant to the community by going in the direction that you chose. What was that driving force? Was it something in your family? Was it something that you felt was an innate part of you? What was that drive?
It was always a commitment to law enforcement. And I think early on in college and even up into law school, law enforcement patrol officers really were something that I thought were important in kind of keeping society intact. I didn't think I was really cut out to be on the roads and late at night in the cold and doing those things, but the best thing I could do to serve in that realm would really go into law school and go on to be a prosecutor, where I could really be the second arm of law enforcement, as I like to call it.
I tell you what, and we're glad you made that decision because we've benefited as a result of it. Could you tell me a little bit about what state's attorney, what they do, what they are, kind of your responsibility, day-to-day activities, what they have to do as far as preparation, things like that?
So let me talk about the office first. So the office of the state's attorney for Harford County really stems from the elected state's attorney. And each county in Maryland and Baltimore City each have their own elected state's attorney. That's 24 total across the state. The state's attorney is responsible for the prosecution and presentation of criminal cases to local courts, here being in Harford County, obviously, on just about all crimes that occur within your jurisdiction. Now, there are other prosecutors, mainly the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Office of the Attorney General, the Office of the State Prosecutor, that would have some jurisdiction either on their own or concurrent with us in prosecuting and investigating criminal cases. But by and large, Harford County and the Office of the State's Attorney does virtually all of the crime that occurs within our jurisdiction. So Mr. Castley is the elected state's attorney. He serves for 4-year terms. He answers directly to the voters. And by his authority, he appoints 2 deputies and as many assistant state's attorneys as the county allows. And we're responsible for really cooperating and taking the cases that your department and the sheriff's office, the state police, and the other 2 municipal agencies, Bel Air Police Department and the Havre de Grace Police Department, bring forward. We're responsible for presenting that to the courts. There's 2 courts in Harford County that we mainly deal with, and that's the district court and the circuit court. The district court is mainly our misdemeanor court. These are the lower level offenses, serious traffic offenses, even payable citations, which we typically don't handle. But the circuit court is also our responsibility as well, and that's where we handle most of our felonies, our major cases, our major investigations. Things from rapes, robberies, murder, anything in between that you can imagine.
So in your tenure with the office, you've had the experience of seeing both courts pretty intimately as far as trying cases and handling situations in both sides of the aisle, correct?
Yes.
All right, then could you talk a little bit about what kind of cases you handle, and what differentiates someone that would, say, go to court on the district level
Sure.
or the circuit court side, and just for those in our audience that may not be aware of, if I commit this crime, what happens, or what the process is after something like that, an incarceration occurs.
We'll start at the lowest level down in the district court, and those are your low-level offenses. That's anything from speeding tickets and parking tickets, things that are what we call non-jailable offenses. Those are ones that our office doesn't actually directly get involved with. The police officer will usually present the case on behalf of the state, and our office doesn't get involved because there's no potential for incarceration. Our office does get involved in serious traffic matters, and those are typically DUIs, driving suspended, hit-and-run citations, things like that. Those are the type of cases that carry some jail, so we do prosecute those. Also in the district court are other low-level misdemeanor offenses, as I mentioned, things from shoplifting, thefts, drug possession, minor assaults, things of that nature, lower-level offenses. Most people haven't been in for criminal cases as defendants, but most people have probably been in for a speeding ticket. Mm-hmm. They're both handled by the same court, and that's our district court division, or district court. We also, again, have the circuit court, and that is where we'll hear the felony cases, and that's where we have jury trials. In the district court, there are no jury trials. The finder of fact there is a district court judge. In the circuit court, it is typically a jury of Harford County peers.
All right, and a lot of people ask us all the time, what do you do if you're a crime victim? And we have a crime victims brochure that we give out to victims of crime. It explains their rights. It explains avenues that they can explore to empower themselves and to help themselves heal from whatever the offense. But on your side of the aisle, what do you do as an office, the state's attorney's office? What do you do for victims of crime?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because prosecution in 2018 is a lot different than it was 50 years ago. While we don't have clients, we do have victims. And it's a little bit different than most lawyer relationships where a lawyer has a client and answers to that client directly. We as prosecutors or state's attorneys don't have clients. We represent the state, and we represent the state on behalf of victims or on behalf of the state as a whole, as an entity. But victims of crime are very important. Also by statute in the last 10 or 15 years, the Maryland legislature, rightfully so, has actually codified, which is to say enacted laws that have given rights to victims of crimes in the court and judicial process. So if you're a victim of a crime, you have a lot of rights, and there are a lot of things that you should expect to be able to experience as a victim that you didn't have 20, 30 years ago. First and foremost, you have the right to be updated and kept abreast of a case that affects you. You should be able to call and speak to a prosecutor about your case and find out the status of it. You should be made aware of all court dates that involve your case. You have a right to be heard as a victim, to present and discuss and talk to the prosecutor handling your case or people and staff from our office about what your thoughts and feelings are. Ultimately, we have to make a decision, but we always take into consideration what a victim has to say. It may not be always exactly what they want, but we always have to take that into consideration, and I think our office does a very good job of doing that. Most importantly, as a victim, though, you have a right to be present at trial or at sentencing, and that's a right that a lot of victims don't really, for one reason or another, don't actually exercise. One, either they don't care. Two, they're too scared to come in and address a court sentencing, or three, they're just too busy. And these are all natural things that come, but it's a right that each victim has to come and address the court sentencing if it gets that far. And that's one right I always stress to victims in my cases, which is to say, you have a right to be here for this court proceeding. You don't have to be here, but you have an absolute right to be here. And if you want to say anything to the court, this is your opportunity.
What do you tell people that witness crime? And we live in a society now where there is a reluctancy, a hesitancy for people to step forward. And there's a variety of reasons why that sometimes comes into play. And we can provide that reassurance that you're doing the right thing. But that's from our perspective. As a deputy state's attorney, what do you say to someone that witnesses crime? How can you provide some reassurance, or what happens as a crime witness, and how important is it for that witness to bring that testimony forward?
Well, without witnesses, we don't have cases. Let's start with that premise. And that's why having witnesses, live witnesses, and having victims willing to come forward and testify is the most important part of a prosecutor's job. Without them, we don't have a case. Naturally, most people are reluctant to come forward and have to testify and point out somebody that they observed commit a crime. There is a natural discomfort in that. Most people don't like that kind of conflict, and that's human nature, and that's natural. I certainly wouldn't like it, but if called upon to do the right thing, I think most of us do, and most people in Harford County do follow through with that. It's a lot that we ask of people. It's a lot that we ask of witnesses to come forward, take time out of their day to come to court, or to take time out of their day and to come meet with me in my office in preparation for trial. But we recognize that, and we recognize the service that these witnesses are really providing to the community, because what they're able to do is allow us to do our job, which is to remove a bad element from the community, who ultimately affects not only the victim he victimized in one case, but a victim tomorrow or the community at large. So those are the people, the witnesses in our cases, that we owe the biggest debt of gratitude to.
And I couldn't agree more for those brave individuals that are able to witness crime and step forward when they see something and say something. What do you do now? This is very common. You're summoned for jury duty, and you hear so many people, it's almost that regrettable sigh, oh my God, I'm summoned for jury duty. I myself would love to sit on a jury. Could you explain kind of what goes into to being a jurist and how important it is to the whole process?
Jury duty is probably the second most important part of our criminal justice system. And I'd like to point out that last year I was summoned to jury duty, and I served and sat for 2 days during the jury selection process on a criminal case. Unfortunately, I couldn't sit because I knew most of the players involved and actually knew a lot about the case itself. But we went through and did the right thing without complaint and actually sat through the whole process because it's that important. We get judges who get called for jury duty. We get police officers who get called for jury duty. We get politicians who get called for jury duty. And so far, knock on wood, in the 11 years that I've been here, we haven't had any of them disappear or use their status or position to excuse themselves. But I say jury duty is important because without jurors, we aren't able to have jury trials. And the Constitution requires that if somebody wants to have a trial by jury, which is to have a trial to be adjudicated guilty or not guilty by members of their community, we can't do that without jurors. And that's that important. So when you get a jury summons, it's a polite way of the court telling you have to come to court and serve for jury duty. Now, not everybody gets selected for jury duty, but everybody must at least come and be a part of that. That summons is a fancy way of saying it's a court order. So it's not an invitation that you can decline. The jury summons comes from the court, and that's an order. The process itself, jury selection, is a little bit antiquated, but it's still the greatest system that I think we have in the world as far as picking a jury and having criminal trials. We basically take a larger panel, anywhere from 50 to 150 potential jurors, depending on the type of case it is.
Can I just stop you right there? So I think it's hard for people to really take in the magnitude of this. So and let's maybe flash back to a case that you handled, and it's a high-profile murder case. How many on that first panel are you looking at?
Okay, so
walk us through that process.
A murder case is what we call a 20-strike jury, which means that the defense has 20 peremptory strikes and can eliminate up to 20 people for no reason at all, and that would give the state, which would be the prosecutors, 10. Then you've got to factor in, you have to seat 12 of actual jurors, and you're probably going to have 3, if not 4, possibly sometimes 5 alternate jurors. And you have to allow and factor in that there are going to be a number of people, for any number of reasons, just simply cannot serve. They're medically unable to, their schedule won't permit it. So in a high-profile murder case, we're typically bringing in anywhere between 100 to 150 potential jurors just to get down to 12. And sometimes the 150 isn't enough. And so we may dip into the panel the next day and actually bring in some more jurors to potentially serve.
So this highlights the importance of when those summonses are sent out, why the need on any given day is so great to have so many jurists available, just because of the amount that potentially you could be stricken from the pool.
And for you folks at home who feel like you've maybe been picked on and gotten jury duty seemingly every couple of years, There's a reason behind that, because we're bringing in jury panels 4 days a week, 50 weeks a year, and anywhere between 50 to 150 potential jurors. We figure there's about 250,000 people in the county, and only a certain amount of those are old enough to serve, and a certain amount of those are only eligible to serve for a number of other different reasons. So there really is a small pool from which to draw.
And what is the exact pool? Where do they come from?
So jurors are summoned in from court. We get it from two sources, and that's from the Motor Vehicle Administration. If you have a driver's license, you are now eligible for jury duty. If the other source is if you're registered to vote. Those are the two main sources of potential jurors.
Well, that's an excellent explanation of that process. And I guess right now, and you've probably in your career seen a lot, but what's the craziest case that you've seen where, I know in law enforcement there's things we see on a day-to-day basis. If you were to explain to the layperson, it all may seem pretty crazy. But when you make people that experience this on a daily basis say that's crazy, it really is crazy. So one of those type cases.
Well, not to make light of it, this was a very, very serious case about 5 years ago. About 5 or 6 years ago. The sheriff's office ended up investigating the case, and it all occurred in, I believe it was Joppa, and there was a young man who was a college student at Morgan State, who had killed and dismembered and ate part of his victim, ate a part of his brain, and ate part of his heart that he cooked in the oven at home, at the home he shared with his family. That one was a very, very tough and bizarre case. There's no other way to put it. I'm sorry, but it was one of the very strangest ones that we've seen in a long time. Mostly because you have a victim who was brutally murdered and then brutally dismembered, and his body was basically defiled. And then you have the victim and his family who also had to suffer through the knowledge of what had happened to him. But that was probably one of the scariest and ugliest cases that I think I've seen in my career.
And how does that make, I know you kind of have to take a step back, but how does that, when you're exposed to people's experiences in the worst conditions, under the worst circumstances, how does that make you feel, these sad cases? What is that like dealing with it? How are you able to kind of compartmentalize that?
It's emotionally draining. It is, just like a lot of law enforcement officers have to see firsthand car accidents where people die, or drug overdose deaths, or witnessing people really at their worst in domestic violence situations, or just really truly turn their lives into chaos. So it is emotionally draining for us as prosecutors to see it. Now, we typically don't see all the blood and guts and gore like you guys do in the front lines, but we do see the after effects of dealing with victims and victims' families and witnesses who are, may not be a big case to us, but is that person's worst day. And you kind of have to remember that as an advocate on behalf of them, and it's an advocate for the state, that you're dealing with people that this is the biggest case in their lives. So it does wear on you, and you have to leave it at home sometimes. Some days you can't. And so that's why there's a little bit of a burnout in prosecutors across the state and really across the country that a lot don't feel like they're getting paid enough for what it is that they're dealing with. And there isn't a whole lot of blame that can be put on those people, because we're really being asked to see a lot and see people at their ugliest every day.
Not to stay on the negative, but what is one of the saddest cases, that you've ever worked, where you've had to kind of push everything aside and drive forward to make sure that you were representing the victim?
I think one of the saddest cases, for a lot of reasons, really was a drunk driving fatality that I handled a number of years ago. A young man who was probably in his early 20s was driving home from a bar that he had way too much to drink, and he was driving his girlfriend home, and he had gotten into an argument with her. On the drive home, he thought he was going in one direction, but ended up in the complete opposite part of the county, not realizing it, and driving way too fast around a series of turns. Hit another car head-on in a collision. Our suspect, our defendant, actually crossed the double yellow lines and hit this poor guy just as he was going to work. And he was going to work very early in the morning so he could get his shift done. He was coming from Pennsylvania, and he wanted to get his shift done before the Ravens game was coming on at 1 o'clock that day. And tragedy that it was. He died right at the scene, and the suspect lived, as well as his girlfriend, and we prosecuted him. We prosecuted him for vehicular manslaughter. He did a good chunk in jail. He got out of jail, was put on probation, and the other half of the sad part of this is that not only did that one man die, leaving behind a widow, the fortunate thing was his children were grown, so there was at least that silver lining in all of that. But this young man did his time, got out on probation, failed at his probation the first time, went back into jail for another 18 months, I think, got out on probation again, and has disappeared and absconded off probation now, and he's wanted to this day after several years. And he's going to spend the rest of his life, or at least until he's picked up, wondering when the long arm of the law, like you all, are going to find him wherever he is.
Hopefully it's sooner than later. And let's just kind of shifting gears. You talked about the burnout. Let's talk about the caseload. How many cases do you think you've handled this year?
Well, this year as a deputy, I've actually dialed back the actual in-court prosecution. Most of the in-court prosecution is done by the assistants. Those are our front-line prosecutors who are doing the bulk of the work. As deputy, I'm now involved in the administration. So
the assignment of cases.
The assignment of cases, the overview and supervision of cases. I'm spending a little less time in court. Now, I still have an active roster of cases, and I still have a number of high-profile and serious violent felonies that I'm handling myself. So that has shifted. Now, traditionally, prosecutors in our office, depending on what division you're in, will handle different types of caseloads. So, for example, I actually ran some numbers this afternoon and ran averages based on 2016 numbers of the 2017 numbers of the cases that we've handled.
So this will be a snapshot of what the caseload is for your ASAs?
Yeah, that's what I would say. So in our circuit court division, which again is our felony division, those prosecutors are going to be handling somewhere between 150 and 175 cases a year. Most of their cases are going to be felony cases, major cases, serious cases, but they'll also handle their fair share of misdemeanor cases that have made their way up from the district court up to the circuit court. So they will handle about 150 to 175 cases in any given year, any new cases. Now, from year to year, you may have some carryover cases as time goes. So your caseload will fluctuate wildly depending on scheduling and luck sometimes. In our district court, which is our misdemeanor division again, there you have a much higher volume series of cases just because cases take less time to try, are less complicated, and there's less at stake. So a district court prosecutor can expect to handle between 775 and 800 cases in a year. And those happen on those district court dockets where you may have a series of shoplifting cases, a series of misdemeanor, very minor assault cases, and maybe some serious traffic cases like a drunk driving or two. So you can handle 10, 15, 20 cases in a day in district court.
Just thinking of the preparation for that type of caseload, what's a given work week for a brand new ASA that's working at the district level trying to manage that kind of caseload? How does that stretch out over a 5-day work week?
So our people we typically work general business hours, and that can fluctuate too depending on the caseload, depending whether you're in trial or not. So our people will typically arrive by 8 o'clock, and they may do some morning desk work. Most people are in court. We've got 30 lawyers in our office, and most people are in some court just about every day. So by 9 or 9:30, most people are in a courtroom somewhere in this county handling some type of case. So the district court prosecutors, most of their business is done by lunchtime, and then they'll spend their afternoons prepping the next day's docket.
So it never stops?
Never stops. It's an endless cycle of cases coming through. Our circuit court people may have a little bit more variation on their schedule for trials, just because their trials can take 2, 3, 4. I had one case, or actually I had 2 cases that took 2 weeks to try. So you're working Monday through Friday in trial, having a weekend break, and coming back the next Monday, and you're working Monday through Friday in trial. And it's during those trials where things become really difficult to keep up with your other work, because you're unable to do your other work while you're in trial.
Well, you've had 12 years with the Harford County State's Attorney's Office as an assistant state's attorney and now as the deputy state's attorney. What are some of the highlights, the significant accomplishments that you can share briefly over that tenure, over that career span?
Sure, and these are all, I think these are all highlights that have, I can't take credit for. I really have to attribute most of this to Joe Castley, who's been the elected state's attorney for over 35 years. And everything that he's built and established we've been the beneficiaries of having a well-run office like that. But one thing that I'm certainly proud of is that we take a very serious line on domestic assault. A lot of places don't. A lot of places don't see a physical confrontation between a husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend, and won't take it seriously. We will, because today's small domestic assault may result in a very serious domestic assault tomorrow, or worst case scenario, you may have a homicide on your hands. So we like to take them all serious, no matter what they are. The other thing I think I'm most proud of, and I got some information today that I'd like to share because this will be breaking news.
Please share away.
Is our approach to drunk driving and drug driving prosecution. That's really a crime that I think affects everybody, because someone who's hit by a drugged or drunk driver really didn't know it was coming. They're victimized, and it's the victimization that occurs across the board, no matter who you are, no matter where you are in the county. We've always had, Harford County and the state's attorney's office, it's always had one of the highest conviction rates in the state. I looked at some stats today. 2014, we had an 89% conviction rate, which is good enough to be number 4 in the state in the percentage in the conviction rate. We were number 4 out of 24 counties. We improved on that in 2015, where we again had an 89.68% conviction rate. That was good enough to put us number 3 in the county. Now, keeping in mind, number 1 and number 2 were always within just barely a percentage point, so we've always kept up with Worcester and Wacomico County down the shore. But today I called and got the latest numbers from our 2016 prosecutions, and this is hot off the presses because
Coming to you on APD Facebook Live, folks.
this was not supposed to be released until June at the MSAA Summer Conference, but I did confirm today that in 2016, Harford County, in our office, my office, had a 91% conviction rate on drunk driving and drug driving cases, and that was good enough to rank us. What do you think we were ranked?
Well, the crescendo, I'm feeling number 1. I'm going to...
Tied for number 1. We were tied for number 1 with Worcester County again.
Excellent.
So, it's something we're really, really proud of.
As you should be.
That we don't take those things lightly. It's a crime that affects all people, and I think that's one of our biggest accomplishments. The other thing that I think is really big for us is that our office really only is a part and a partner of it is the Harford County Narcotics Task Force. Now, I know you're familiar with the task force in your supervisory role, as well as your time coming up through the ranks as well. But I think we have one of the greatest task forces across the state by far and large. Our sheriff, state police, your agency, the Havre de Grace Police Department, the Bel Air Police Department, have partnered along with the state's attorney's office in really targeting and approaching drug dealers in this county and being relentless about it. It's an amazing squad that's put together really big, significant cases, many of which lead back to Baltimore City, as you're aware. Clearly, the heroin epidemic is what they are targeting, what they're after, and they're getting some really, really good success. The sheriff put out a press release either yesterday or the day before about a case that led back to Baltimore City. Came from originated out of Harford County and resulted in over $400,000 in U.S. currency being seized and almost a kilogram of heroin being seized out of that residence as well. And that's all due to people like you on the front lines doing the dirty work and the hard work to identify and get these drugs off the street.
And to give people an idea, a kilo of coke, a kilogram, is 2.2 pounds of heroin. And that's cut down and through processes. It's a huge amount of drugs that was prevented from getting in the hands of those that are suffering through the pitfalls of addiction. What are some of the other accomplishments? I've had a very unique opportunity in my career to work nearly every facet of law enforcement, and one of the most impressive ventures, a partnership, a true collaboration, is the Child Advocacy Center. Very specialized, just forensic interviewers, the folks from CPS, the dedicated police personnel that are assigned. I don't want to leave folks out, but they do a fabulous job. Can you talk a little bit about Detective Milton Alexander from our agency represents us for cases that involve the Child Advocacy Center here in Aberdeen. Just a remarkable collaboration. Could you talk a little bit about this? And this is something, if a child is being abused, just kind of give some insight into what it's all about.
So the Child Advocacy Center was really a product and the idea of Joe Castley a number of years ago. I want to say almost 20 years ago, if not more. It was one of the first child advocacy centers in the country. And the model that they created and still implement today is really a multidisciplinary approach with different law enforcement agencies investigating child physical abuse cases and child sexual abuse cases. And these are the most innocent of all victims, and there's anybody who can disagree with that. And these are the most at-risk victims that you can have. And basically what it is the ability for federal, state, and local law enforcement entities to come together in one building, separate and apart from my office, separate and apart from your police department, in an environment that's really comfortable for children. And in that, they're able to bring in social workers from the state, as well as child advocates from my office and other agencies, to really sit down and discuss and help the families and decide what's best for this child. What can we do as a team in identifying a criminal person to investigate, and what can we do for this child to help them get out of this situation and really carry on from the abuse that they've suffered, whether it's through counseling, whether it's through the removal process of the home or from their abuser, but all kinds of things. It really is a holistic approach to really centering around the child.
And the follow-up there is amazing to see the victims truly are cared after beyond the criminal prosecution.
Well beyond. They come back year after year, and our people will still remember them, and these young people, as they get older and they become adults, they'll pop into the center and still meet with and want to talk to and update the people who were involved in their cases.
Well, we're going to fast forward things. We're a little bit over 30 minutes into the show, and I invite anyone out there watching right now, if you have a question, something that's always been on your mind, you've wanted to talk to a member of the Harford County State's Attorney's Office. You have the Deputy State's Attorney here. No better person to answer that question. But on the forefront, we kind of waited to delve into this, but this has taken America, the headlines. This is a crisis that's unprecedented. The numbers that keep coming out are staggering each year of fatal and non-fatal overdoses, and that's our opioid crisis. This is something that the likes that none of us have ever seen before. What is your office, what are you doing, and what are you prepared to do to confront this crisis?
Well, I'm glad you presented it that way. I think this is a crisis that is different than in times past. And people will tell you that heroin, as we traditionally knew it, has kind of come and gone by generation to generation. But I think the thing that makes it different in 2018 and say in the last probably 36 months is really the deadliness of the heroin that we're seeing now and that you're seeing. Some of the changes your departments had to make in handling suspected heroin out on the street. There is a huge difference in the heroin that we see now than we did 5 years ago, 20 years ago, and 30 years ago. It is truly a killer. It is the fentanyl that's mixed into it, and the carfentanil, all the synthetic opioids that are going into it, which are making this drug, which you may have been able to battle the addiction a long time ago, but it's so powerful now that it's becoming just more deadly. And that's really what makes it the crisis that you refer to. And we often refer to it as an opioid crisis, but that's clearly what it is. What our office does is really make a targeted approach and make a priority for us, which is removing drug dealers from the community. These are the people who are injecting this poison into the stream of commerce, into the stream of victims of people who would use it because they can't battle their addiction and they can't beat that problem. And our first priority is to remove and eliminate those drug dealers who are doing it at profit and take them out of our community. The other half of what we do is we like to seize and basically we seize property and money. And we seize the property and money, which are the proceeds of drug dealers, to eliminate and take away the profitability from what they do. So if in any given day, in any case where your agency or other members of the task force take cars or cash from somebody,
which we have on multiple occasions,
we will file a civil forfeiture action in the form of a civil suit, and we'll take that money and return it back to the community and return it to the county government in which we work. And that's really important because by eliminating the profitability for these drug dealers, we're thereby helping to put something of a stumbling block for the drug dealers who would be out there for profit. We've taken houses, we've taken cars, we've taken jewelry, watches, anything you can imagine that's a direct proceed of the drug trade and the drug profit game.
Well, I think when just to kind of rewind back to what you were saying about the precautions of law enforcement. We are actually outfitting the members of our police department, deputies on the road, troopers, other municipal officers in the county. Everyone now is being equipped with special gear to handle these drugs. And you touched on it earlier that it's changed the way we're handling, the way we seize drugs. We can no longer do field tests that we used to do before because of the sheer danger of just the smallest amount of exposure can lead you into arrest. So it truly is dangerous times that we're living in. How do we? And this is the question. There is no simple solution. There's not. Someone would be wealthy beyond belief. But from a solution standpoint, where do we start to really make a dent in this?
Sure.
And what is the approach of the State's Attorney's Office and your role in that?
Well, and the other half of what we do, and as you can imagine, we get a large number of drug possession cases, and these are typically users who are either abusing or using, because of addiction, narcotic drugs, whether it be cocaine or heroin or even pills, marijuana, anything in between that you can imagine. Depending on the level of addiction will depend on what it is that they need to get out of the situation they're in. So through the prosecution, we do prosecute possession cases, possession of marijuana, possession of heroin cases. We are able to give these people the tools that they really need in order to beat this. And as you've seen firsthand in doing what you do and what we do, if you don't get a handle of a heroin problem, it's a very high likelihood you're going to end up dead, and it's just a matter of when, not a question of if. And certainly through the prosecution process, once you bring a case to us, we really don't want to put people in jail for possession, people who have a medical problem. But we're able to give them certain tools that they need to take and make use of in order to beat that addiction. We have a great opiate recovery court in our district court, and that's designed for people who truly have an opiate addiction. So
there is now, if I'm arrested and I'm found to have an opiate, there's actually almost a diversion into an opiate court right now. I didn't know that.
As recently as 5 years ago, we used to call it drug court because drug court encompassed people who had an addiction or substance abuse problem with marijuana, cocaine, prescription medication, maybe a little bit of heroin. Now it's an entire court devoted just to opiate recovery, whether it's prescription opiate pills, heroin, or fentanyl, or anything.
Have you seen a huge increase in the number of people that are coming through that? Is that something that kind of correlates with the amount of overdoses?
Yeah, that court has really picked up, and the county has really done a good job. Our Office of Drug Control Policy has done an excellent job of really giving all the tools that these people need in order to help overcome that. And that comes through what's called the Vivitrol shot, which is a shot that a person will receive, I believe it's every month, that will help eliminate the uptake of the chemicals that allow you to feel the euphoria of the pills that you're taking or the opiates you want to take. And it helps eliminate the desire, the craving for that drug. And it really helps them get a good start at being sober from these substances. But they also have individual outpatient programs for counseling. There's inpatient programs for counseling that the health department can get you in. There's group counseling. There's all kinds of things depending on what your level of addiction is, what your level of problem is, that the county health department is able to provide, along with Vivitrol and the general nature of parole and probation, which is to keep you busy, keep you out of trouble, make sure structure is important in all this.
What resources, and I know there's some direct lines that if you're watching right now, if you have a suspicion that a loved one, friend, someone close to you, coworker, is battling, that are in the vice grip of opioid addiction, any numbers that they can call right now that you guys are familiar with that we can channel that person in the direction to sobriety, to recovery?
There really has to be one clearinghouse where you just start. Whether it's you who has an individual addiction or a problem, or you think you might, or you have a loved one who you need help with and need to get to the right resources, there's one number that you really should be calling. And I talked to Joe Ryden today, who's the director of Office of Drug Control Policy, and I asked him, I said, Joe, who do people call if they need it? They need this address, they need this address now, and they don't know where else to go. Where is the one place that they start? So the number you want to call is 443-417-7810. That will put you in touch with something called a recovery coach. coach. And that's going to be somebody who's going to be able to listen to your needs and listen to understand the problem that you're in and get you pointed in the right direction. That's the place that you really have to get started at. 443-417-7810, and that's going to get the recovery coach. But that's not necessarily the only place that you can seek help, but if you that's always a good place to start. You can call the Office of Drug Control Policy, get started with them. Their number's 410-638-3329. Mr. Ryan's office is well equipped to handle these types of cases and get people lined up where they need to be.
And we'll put these numbers in our comment section so that folks will have those and have those immediately available if someone needs that.
Right. And depending on people's insurance, if they have health insurance and what level of insurance they have, they can always call their insurance company. All the insurance companies have the ability, if you're covered, to get you lined up with treatment and addiction assistance that you need. There's not, and the resources don't end there. There's so many out there, and so for anyone who's looking for help, there really is no excuse that you don't know where to go. There are countless resources out there, free and paid. Some are covered by insurance, some aren't. Talk to your employer. Talk to your HR if you have a job that carries certain benefits. Your HR will be able to get you involved with an employee assistance program. I know the county has it. If you have I don't know, I'm assuming the town of Aberdeen does as well. If you have a substance abuse problem and you need help, you can go to the employee assistance program anonymously, get the help you need without any fear or any embarrassment of what anybody will think, because the problem needs to be addressed immediately. There's one other resource that I think is really important. The Sheriff's Office uses this as a good point of contact as well. The acronym it's called SAMHSA, S-A-M-H-S-A, and that stands for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And they have a website, which is the
Is it a state program? Or
it's a federal program.
Federal.
It'll get you by geography and by what your needs are and get you pointed in the right direction of who to call and how. And it really is a good clearinghouse to start as well. So if you don't want to pick up the phone and call that 443 number for the recovery coach, you can go online right now and go to SAMHSA. The website is www.samhsa.org. samhsa.org. So many resources on there available.
And in having this interview, it's clear to me that this isn't, the Harford County State's Attorney's Office isn't taking the posture where just prosecution alone is going to bring us out of this.
Sure.
This is a all hands on deck, using a multifaceted approach to really find and create a solution.
Sure, absolutely.
And it's amazing just sitting here finding out about programs that I was unaware of. Finally, and this is a resource, everybody comes into the schools and they ask the question, or parents pose the question, what do I do if with our kids, they're possibly using? Is there a resource for things to look for behaviors? And this is maybe a larger topic than just today, but is there information that you know of offhand at the State's Attorney's Office that you guys use or refer people when dealing with that topic of, what do we do to kind of beat this with the kids?
Well, one thing that I think is really important is talking to your kids about drugs now. It's never too early. It's never too early. It's never too early to have that discussion. And I believe the Office of Drug Control Policy actually puts out a pamphlet that kind of gives you talking points, depending on your child's age group, of having that appropriate level of discussion, because having that discussion with a 4-year-old is going to be a different type of discussion
Sure.
with a 14-year-old. And you need to have that appropriate level. But you do need to be talking to your children about drugs now. I think that a different generation, we may have held off until children were in middle school, but we're finding that middle school is too late. Kids already have been exposed to drugs and heroin as early as middle school. So if you haven't had that discussion with them beforehand, you may already be too late. So we certainly encourage, and I believe we're in sync with the Office of Drug Control Policy as well as the Harford County Sheriff's Office and the agencies as well. You need to have that discussion with them now.
Well, I know I have School Resource Officer Jason Neidig here with us. I know you guys are very active at the middle school level, providing education to students. If we can reach the youth, there is a potential to kind of stave this epidemic. Mr. Ryan, I'd like to thank you for coming out today. It's been an awesome experience hearing a little bit kind of behind the scenes of the State's Attorney's Office. Anyone that has questions right now, do we have anything coming in State insurance offers no help. Now what?
This is a question from one of the
This has come in
viewers?
from a viewer. State insurance offers no help. Now what?
So my expectation is that the viewer who had this problem or may have had this problem come up may be dealing directly with the insurance company that's provided by the state. My suggestion would be to call Joe Ryan's office, the Office of Drug Control Policy. Again, the number's 410-638-3329. Tell them what your problem is. Tell them what your situation is, whether you have insurance and what kind of carrier, and they'll be able to help you get lined up, I think, where you need to be. And I think that should be a good place to start.
Excellent. Do we have any more questions? All right. Well, that's going to conclude the Community Corner tonight. This episode of the Community Corner was brought to us by the Aberdeen Dog Park. If you have not visited, oh, there it is. If you have not visited the Aberdeen Dog Park, take the opportunity to travel over to Victory Park, and you'll be impressed by the amenities that have been provided for your four-legged friend. I challenge you, go check out the dog park and have a great experience. Mr. Ryan, thank you again, sir. It's been a great night. I look forward to seeing you folks in the months to come. Be safe out there and have a good evening.